I didn't cry. That surprised me the most. Not when I saw the balance at zero. Not when I stared at the login alert from some IP address I didn't recognize in New Jersey. Not even when I stood in Paul's office, shaking, hoping there was some other explanation. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was one of those sharp, stunned sounds you let out when reality becomes too stupid to process. Like when your car dies on the freeway after you just paid for a full inspection. Like when someone says, "We did this for you," as they twist the knife. Paul didn't flinch. Just leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his neck, and looked at me like a disappointed professor. "You were always too trusting," he said. "That money's gone to something far more impactful, your cousin's startup." My name is Elena Rowe. I'm 30 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, and up until 3 days ago, I was about to build my dream home, a self-sustaining retreat in the Cascades with solar panels, a gravity-fed water system, and a passive heating design I'd spent 2 years perfecting. 10 years of living cheap. 10 years of working overtime and stashing every bonus, every freelance check, every birthday dollar into what I called my retreat fund. It was all gone. "Are you serious?" I whispered. I could barely hear my own voice over the blood pounding in my ears. Paul looked away for a second, maybe pretending to feel something. Maybe not. "Aaron's work is going to change the world," he said. "You building a cabin in the woods? That's personal. Small." I blinked. "It was mine." "That's the thing," he said with a weird kind of calm. "You never asked whose hands held the fund. You let me mentor you. You let me open that shared account under the firm. And I warned you, keep some of it elsewhere." I thought I had. I really thought I had. My laugh came out again, high and almost amused. "So that's it? All my money. Just gone." Paul tilted his head, like I was being dramatic. "It's a reallocation. A strategic decision." I stared at the wall behind him, at the framed blueprint of that sustainable community he always talked about, the one we never actually built. "You're unbelievable." He shrugged. "You're brilliant. But naive." I turned to leave, then stopped halfway. My hands were still trembling. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to rip every drawing I'd ever done under his supervision. Instead, I looked back over my shoulder. "You know," I said, "I worked for 10 years to get to this moment. I sacrificed every vacation, every impulse, every weekend to save that money." Paul didn't respond. I gave him one last glance. "And I trusted you." He nodded once, as if that should be enough. I walked out of his office, through the glass doors of Kingsley architecture, past the reception desk where the intern smiled awkwardly at me, unaware that I had just lost everything. I stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored interior. Pale. Stiff. But not broken. Not yet. The absurdity of it all sat like a rock in my chest. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed one last time. Short. Hollow. And then I said it, out loud, to no one. "Let me tell you how it all began. I grew up in Aurora, just outside Denver. We had a 3-bedroom ranch house that sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, where the lawns were always trimmed and the neighbors judged each other silently from across driveways. From the outside, it looked like a solid middle-class setup. Stable. Predictable. Inside, though, it was a damn spreadsheet. My mom, Linda, worked as a logistics coordinator for a freight company. That meant 2 things: she loved control and she loved clocks. Every hour of my day had a designated activity. Wake up at 6:15. Shower by 6:30. Breakfast done by 6:45. No TV before school. No snacks between meals. Homework had to be logged in a binder with estimated time projections and actual completion metrics. I'm not kidding, she used a red pen to mark efficiency. My stepdad, Greg, was an urban planner with the city. He wore beige slacks and glasses with a chain around the neck, and he believed that kids shouldn't worry themselves with adult concerns. Anytime I asked about money, or taxes, or why we always seemed to skip vacations, he'd go, "Kids don't need to worry about money, Elena. That's not your job." But it was my job. I felt it every time the AC clicked off on a 100-degree day because we had to stay under budget. Every time I saw Mom reading bank statements with her lips pressed tight. Every time Greg mentioned something about how the world rewards those who build, not dreamers. I was neither rewarded nor visible. Then there was Aaron, my cousin on my mom's side. The family golden boy. He lived just a few miles away with my aunt and uncle, and somehow, their house was a different universe. At 12, he had a 3D printer. At 13, a membership to a private skate park. At 14, he went to a tech camp in San Diego and came back with a drone. "He's got potential," Mom used to say, watching him tinker with circuits in the living room. "He's going to change the world." Me? I got graph paper. I started drawing floor plans in secret when I was 10. At first, they were just little fantasy houses, one-story cabins with giant skylights and treehouse bedrooms. But over time, they got more detailed. I'd map out plumbing routes, calculate square footage, sketch solar panel angles based on Colorado sun patterns. It was the only time I felt free, when I was designing. Quiet. Precise. Mine. I had to hide it. Mom said drawing houses was a waste of potential unless I wanted to become one of those housewives on HGTV. Greg said architecture was too risky. That engineering's where the money is. So I did it in notebooks I slid between math textbooks. Late at night, under the covers with a flashlight. I even drew out a full redesign of our backyard once, with a water catchment system and a vertical garden wall made from reclaimed gutters. No one ever saw it. But I remember. Aaron would come over on weekends, and the adults would fawn. "He's learning C++, they'd gush. He's got that tech mind." One time, I showed him one of my sketches, just to see what he'd say. He looked at it for maybe 3 seconds before shrugging. "Cool," he said. "You should make it a VR thing. Like, you could walk through it digitally." That was the closest I ever got to praise. Back then, I didn't know what I was missing. I just knew that if I stayed quiet, if I followed the plan, I wouldn't get in trouble. If I smiled and cleaned my room and stuck to my time blocks, they'd leave me alone. But part of me was already building an escape. One line at a time, one room at a time, on paper no one wanted to see. I wasn't loud like Aaron. I wasn't rebellious. But I knew I didn't belong in that system. I didn't want to be part of their curated suburb of routines and expectations. So I made my own foundation. It just happened to be drawn in pencil. I was 17 when I mailed the application. No ceremony, no family meeting, no dramatic confrontation. Just a stamped envelope slipped into the blue mailbox outside the Safeway on Chambers Road. My hand shook a little when I dropped it in, but I didn't look back. I applied to a small design college in the Midwest, a place no one in my family had heard of, the kind where classes were project-based and professors wore jeans. They specialized in sustainable architecture and offered trade certification options alongside a bachelor's. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't prestigious. But it was mine. When I got the acceptance letter, I didn't tell anyone for 2 weeks. I kept it in the drawer under my socks and took it out at night just to reread the words. "Dear Ms. Rowe, we're pleased to inform you." The day I told them, my parents, was the same day I moved out. I'd already secured a shared studio apartment with 3 other students who responded to a classified listing. I'd already arranged a used futon, paid the first month's rent using freelance rendering jobs I'd picked up online. I stood in the kitchen with my backpack on and my car keys in my hand. My mom blinked like I'd just told her I was joining a cult. "You're going where?" My stepdad didn't even look up from his laptop. "I thought you were applying to CU Boulder." "I didn't," I said. You didn't tell us, Mom snapped. I didn't think I had to. You live in this house. I don't anymore. She opened her mouth again, but I was already walking to the door. They didn't stop me. Maybe they didn't believe I'd really do it. Or maybe they thought I'd come back after a semester, broke and defeated. I didn't. That first year was brutal. I juggled 6 freelance clients while studying full-time. I slept in a room that had a water stain on the ceiling and an outlet that buzzed every time I plugged in my laptop. I worked as a barista 3 mornings a week and cleaned studio floors on weekends to keep the lights on. I built 3D models for realtors, did graphic mock-ups for tiny companies no one had heard of, and took every commission I could land. But I was free. By my 3rd year, I had a steady rotation of clients and had earned enough credits to graduate early. I turned down job offers from 2 big-name firms to accept an internship at a boutique eco-architecture studio in Oregon. They didn't pay much, but they let me get my hands dirty, real projects, real materials, real clients. I designed green roofs, modular walls, passive ventilation systems. I learned how to make buildings breathe. I worked my way up, intern, then junior designer, then lead on small residential builds. My bosses called me methodical. What they meant was I didn't mess around. I hit deadlines. I had my own system. And every extra dollar I earned went into the retreat fund. At first, it was just a savings account. Then it became a spreadsheet, then a full digital ledger, deposits logged, interest calculated, milestones tracked. I treated it like a second job. I skipped concerts, dinners, vacations. I bought second-hand clothes and made my own furniture from salvage wood. While everyone else was spending weekends in wine country or binging shows, I was sketching sun angles and pricing water tanks. I wasn't trying to be frugal for fun. I was preparing for something. I wanted land. Real land. With trees and silence and air that didn't hum with Wi-Fi and traffic. I wanted to build a house that needed no grid, no neighbors, no nonsense. A place that didn't answer to anyone else's rules. 10 years of saving. 10 years of not slipping up. My family didn't know about the fund. I kept it to myself, like a secret blueprint under a floorboard. I didn't talk to them much, anyway. After that first year, we settled into a weird rhythm, polite texts on birthdays, occasional check-ins at holidays. They were never cruel, but they weren't warm either. And I was okay with that. We talked, just never about money. Aaron popped in and out sometimes, usually with some new tech idea or startup pitch. You should invest, he'd say. It's gonna be big. I always smiled, said I'd think about it, then ignored the follow-ups. He didn't push too hard. Not then. Looking back, I should have seen it, how they treated him like the future and me like a phase. Even as my projects started winning awards. Even as I got featured in that sustainability journal. But it didn't matter. I had my plan. My fund. My rules. I told myself, once I buy the land, I'll tell them. Once it's real, they'll see. They didn't have to love it. They just had to know I built it. Without them. The first time Sasha and I saw the property, I swear I stopped breathing. It was tucked against the foothills of the Cascades, a sloping acre surrounded by old-growth firs, with natural rock outcroppings and a slight rise near the back that overlooked a narrow stretch of creek. No paved roads. No fences. Just forest and potential. Sasha had her camera slung over one shoulder and was already crouching to photograph the light coming through the branches before the realtor finished talking. We stood there for almost an hour, just imagining. I could pitch a tent right here, Sasha said, pointing to a sun-drenched patch. And you could start sketching the frame for the south-facing side. It's got water rights, I said, flipping through the packet. And southern exposure. Perfect for solar. You gonna tell them yet? She asked, not looking up from the viewfinder. Nope. I hadn't told my family. Not about the property. Not about the retreat. Not about any of it. I wanted it to be mine. Untouched by their doubts, their judgments, their hierarchy of what counted as real success. I wanted to stand on land I chose, in a home I designed, and say this was built without your blessing. The listing price was steep, $420,000, but I had enough. The retreat fund, built over a decade, was sitting just over $450,000. Add Sasha's small nest egg, and we were covered with room to breathe. Paul, though. Paul the first told. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or some lingering belief that he still had my back after all those years. He'd been my mentor since I was 22, the one who gave me my first big break at the firm, the one who told me, "You've got an edge most architects don't, you see structure where others just see shapes." He knew about the retreat fund. He helped me set up a shared account under the firm's umbrella for bonuses and freelance revenue. "You'll get better rates this way," he said at the time. "Just don't forget to keep track of your deposits." I did. Religiously. So I told him about the land. I brought in a printout of the listing, grinning like a maniac, and laid it on his desk. "This is it," I said. "It's happening." He skimmed the page slowly. Too slowly. "You've already seen it?" he asked, tone light, but his eyes too focused on the details. "Last weekend." "Sasha loves it too." Paul leaned back in his chair and nodded, tapping a corner of the page. "Private sale?" "Listed by a regional firm, but yeah, pretty under the radar." It was subtle, the way he said it. Like a sideways comment buried in casual interest. But it stuck in my gut for hours afterward. Like something wasn't right. I brushed it off. He was just being Paul. Analytical. Controlling. But something in his voice had changed that day. I should have paid more attention. A week later, Sasha and I were on the couch, sifting through our notes, property taxes, zoning permits, timeline estimates, when I got a push notification. New login detected. Device, Chrome on Windows. Location, Jersey City, New Jersey. Time, 7:41 p.m. I stared at it. I don't bank from Chrome. I don't own a Windows machine. And I've never stepped foot in Jersey City. I opened the app and went straight to the account. Nothing looked wrong. Yet. The balance was still there. But the access log showed 3 login attempts from the same IP over the last week. 2 failed. 1 successful. My heart dropped. I didn't say anything right away. Sasha was sorting through trail maps and humming under her breath. I didn't want to panic her, not yet. But I felt the shift. A week later, the listing vanished. Just gone. I checked the real estate site every hour. The page redirected to a generic, no longer available notice. I called the listing agent. Voicemail. I left 2 messages. No reply. That night, I opened my laptop and refreshed the account. Still looked fine. But something felt wrong. The following morning, I opened the same page, and the balance was missing a line item. I stared for 30 straight seconds. The backup account, the one I'd created for escrow transfer, now showed a pending withdrawal. $36,000. Marked as fund reallocation. That was the moment the unease became dread. I stared at the screen, fingers frozen on the trackpad. Paul had access. He'd installed that optimization software 6 months ago, said it was for firm-wide security upgrades. I remembered the way he'd waved off the fine print, the way he'd insisted on helping with the install personally. Sasha looked over my shoulder, saw my face. "Elena?" I didn't answer right away. That land was supposed to be the beginning of something. A new chapter. A promise kept to myself. But now it was slipping, not just the land, but the safety I'd spent 10 years building. And I had a feeling I knew exactly who was holding the rope. I couldn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, Sasha's arm draped over my waist, her breath slow and even beside me while my mind spun. There was no version of this where the login from New Jersey wasn't connected to Paul. The problem was, I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I knew how to get it. By morning, I was back in front of my laptop, every muscle in my body clenched. I ran a diagnostic scan, not the generic antivirus garbage, but the deep forensic kind I'd used once on a client project. The kind that looks for anything hiding behind user processes. It didn't take long. There it was. Buried under a harmless-sounding name, firmopt_runtime.exe. Hidden in plain sight. It had been installed during the firm's optimization week, when Paul had insisted on upgrading our workstations for better syncing. I remembered how casual he'd been about it. Just a background thing, he'd said. It runs smooth. You won't even notice it. He was right. I hadn't noticed. But now, digging through the logs, I saw everything. Remote access points. File copies. Screen captures. Keystroke logs. He hadn't just been watching my work files, he'd been watching me. Everything I typed into my online banking, everything I saved into my fund spreadsheets, every login. He had been there. Invisible. Quiet. Patient. I felt like I was going to throw up. I needed to verify what I was seeing wasn't just old data. I grabbed Sasha's tablet, one I'd never used for banking, and signed into my backup account from there. It still had two-factor authentication and a decoy security question. Sasha sat beside me, watching quietly. The first page looked normal. Then I scrolled. Another withdrawal. This one dated 3 days ago. $50,000 transferred to a business account I didn't recognize. Row Strategic Innovations, LLC. My stomach dropped. Row. My last name. I clicked for the details. Business account registered in Oregon. Opened 4 months ago. Primary signatory, Aaron L. Rowe. Aaron. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the sides of the tablet like it might shatter. Sasha said my name quietly, but I barely heard her. There were now 4 transactions, totaling $360,000, funneled into that shell corporation. My retreat fund, the one I'd built year by year, dollar by dollar, was being siphoned off piece by piece. I was being robbed. By my cousin. Enabled by my mentor. A betrayal signed and sealed by the 2 people I'd trusted most outside of Sasha. By midday, I had already compiled the evidence into a folder. The spyware logs. The business registration for Row Strategic Innovations. The screen captures showing the transfers. A copy of Aaron's pitch deck, public on LinkedIn, of all places, bragging about his upcoming AI hardware venture. Hardware powered by AI to learn your habits before you know them. Hardware funded by me. I waited until the end of the day. I couldn't risk an ambush. I needed to see him. Face to face. I walked into Paul's office just before closing. He was alone. No meetings. No clients. Just him, drinking his usual overpriced coffee, scrolling through some architect magazine like nothing in the world could touch him. He looked up and smiled. Elena. Everything okay? I sat down across from him, placed the folder on his desk, and said nothing. He flipped it open, probably expecting invoices or blueprints. His brow furrowed on the second page. By the 4th, he stopped reading. He didn't even try to close it. I see, he said finally. That was it. I see. Why? I asked. My voice was steady. I'd practiced in the car. I wouldn't cry in front of him. Not now. Paul folded his hands and leaned back slowly. Better your savings build an empire than get buried in soil. I stared at him. You think that's noble? He tilted his head, thoughtful. Vision. It's rare. Aaron has it. You mean you have it? You backed him. He didn't deny it. You always said you wanted to build something bigger than yourself. I just redirected the materials. You stole my money. I invested your future. I laughed. Bitter. Flat. No. You invested in his. Paul's voice was calm. Like he was explaining floor plans to a stubborn client. Aaron's going to change things. What you were building, a house, a retreat, that's admirable, sure. But what he's doing? It's scalable. It's exponential. It's mine, I said. My money. My plan. My life. You were too trusting, he said, echoing that same line from before, like it was a compliment. It was always going to be your blind spot. He stood, like the conversation was over. Don't make this messy, Elena. What's done is done. I stood too, but I didn't pick up the folder. I didn't need it anymore. I looked him dead in the eye. You're right, I said. What's done is done. But this? This isn't over. I walked out without waiting for a reply. He'd taken my money. Now I was going to take everything else. The brunch was already in full swing when I walked in. Big windows. Long table. Fresh cut flowers in a crystal vase like something from a catalog. Paul's house was one of those remodeled mid-century numbers in West Lynn, too clean, too curated. Like a personality vacuum dressed in cedar paneling. Aaron was at the end of the table, half standing, waving a fork as he told some story. My mother was seated beside him, smiling in that thin, performative way she used at country club fundraisers. Greg, my stepfather, was nursing a mimosa, probably on his third. A few aunts and cousins were there too, most of them mid-bite. No one noticed me at first. Then Aaron caught sight of me and blinked. Elena, he said, too bright, too casual. You made it. My mom's head turned sharply. Oh, honey, we didn't think, she stopped when she saw my face. I wasn't invited, I said. I came anyway. Paul stood slowly. Let's not do this here. I ignored him and walked straight to the end of the table. Aaron opened his mouth like he was going to crack a joke, but I beat him to it. $360,000, I said. That's how much you stole. You could hear the knives hitting plates. One by one, heads turned toward me. Aaron's smile faltered. Elena. Don't, I snapped. I have bank logs. Transfer receipts. Screenshots of keystroke logs from spyware Paul installed on my drafting laptop. And the business registration? You didn't even bother hiding it, you named the shell company Rowe Strategic Innovations. Paul stepped forward, hands raised. Let's not make a scene. This is the scene, I said. You made it. I'm just reading the lines. My mother stood, placing her napkin gently on the table. Sweetheart, please. Let's take this outside. You're misunderstanding. I'm not misunderstanding anything, I cut in. You knew. You had to. You were bragging about Aaron's vision at Thanksgiving, remember? Talking about how the future belongs to those willing to take risks. That was code, wasn't it? For take from Elena because she won't fight back. Aaron looked panicked now. Look, I didn't know it was your money. You used my name to open the company, Aaron. You linked your fake business account to a fund labeled retreat account. You think I wouldn't notice? Paul's tone sharpened. It's a family investment. It was always meant to benefit more than just you. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Is that what you told yourselves? That gutting the fund I saved for a decade was for the greater good? You had more than enough, my mom said softly. This way, your cousin has a shot at something bigger. Something important. I turned to her, stunned. You're justifying this? She lifted her chin. It was a chance to lift the whole family. That's what we do. I was shaking now. Not from rage, from restraint. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a USB stick. I tossed it on the table beside Aaron's plate. "What's that?" he asked, voice tight. "Everything," I said. "Every record. Every login. Every piece of proof I need." Paul stepped forward again. "You're threatening legal action?" "No," I said. "I'm informing you. Because if I were threatening you, you'd be sweating. But you're still underestimating me." Silence fell. Then I smiled, not kind, not forgiving. The kind of smile you give someone right before they realize you aren't playing the game they thought you were. "Oh," I added, "and by the way?" They looked up. "The account you drained?" "That was a decoy." Paul blinked. "What? You think I'd keep my entire fund in one place? After you asked to help manage it?" I shook my head. "You only got 36 grand. The rest was offline. Cold storage accounts. Unlinked. Untouchable." Aaron's mouth dropped open. "You, what?" "Yeah," I said. "You stole the bait." My mother's face went pale. Paul said nothing. Greg choked on his mimosa. "And Aaron?" He slumped back in his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him up. "You ruined our lives for a fake fund," he whispered. I leaned in. "No. You ruined your life. I just let you dig the hole." I turned to go, but stopped at the doorway. "Oh, and Mom?" She looked up, startled. "You once told me I wasn't built for independence. That I'd always need this family." I gave her one last smile. "Looks like it's the other way around." Then I walked out. No one followed. The first thing I did after brunch was hire a cybercrime attorney. Her name was Candace Leung. Sharp. Fast-talking. No time for small talk. I liked her immediately. I sent her the folder I'd compiled, the spyware logs, the banking records, the shell company registration, screenshots of Aaron's public LinkedIn bragging, even a photo of the brunch USB stick sitting next to a plate of eggs Benedict. Candace called me within the hour. "You've got a damn case," she said. "Both civil and criminal." I swallowed. "You sure?" "Elena," she replied, her voice dry, "I wish half my clients were as organized as you. This isn't a dispute. It's theft. Digital trespass. Identity fraud. And they signed their own confession with that business name. So we filed a civil suit first, for damages and restitution. Then Candace sent a full report to the state attorney's office for the criminal angle. I expected resistance. I expected denials. I expected Paul to lawyer up and go full scorched earth. Instead, he countersued. For unlawful withholding of shared intellectual property. His claim? That I owed him for career mentorship and development that supposedly contributed to the value of the retreat fund. That our years working together gave him partial claim over my freelance income and project bonuses, which he argued were guided by his influence. I sent that to Candace. She laughed so hard she had to put the phone down. Then Greg, yes, Greg, filed a separate motion claiming I was emotionally indebted to the family for my education and upbringing, and therefore ethically bound to share my financial success with Aaron. I stared at the paperwork for a long time. Then I printed it out, walked to the recycling bin, and dropped it in. But the real shock came from Aaron. He showed up at my door. I opened it to find him standing there, shoulders hunched, holding a brown paper envelope. He looked like he hadn't slept. Or eaten. Or maybe just realized the whole tech empire he was building was made out of cardboard. "I didn't know Paul was watching your laptop," he said. "I didn't know how far it went." I didn't say anything. Just leaned against the frame. He held out the envelope. "This is everything I received from the account. 60,000 total. I can't pay it all back right now, but..." I raised my hand. "Stop." He froze. "You didn't not know, Aaron. You didn't ask." His face twisted, guilty and defensive all at once. He said it was redirected investment. That you were holding out on your potential. That you needed a push. And you believed that. I wanted to believe it, he admitted. Because it made me feel less like a thief. I let the silence hang. Finally, I said, keep the envelope. He looked surprised. I continued, you'll return it in court. With interest. Aaron nodded, defeated. As he turned to go, I called after him. Why Row Strategic Innovations? Why my name? He paused. Because it made the pitch sound legitimate. Like we were building something together. I laughed, cold and low. We never built anything together, Aaron. You just stole the bricks. The next week, the case gained traction. Candace had a media contact who worked in tech ethics. The story hit a few small outlets first, mentorship or exploitation? And then a bigger blog picked it up with the headline. Architect's Dream Fund hijacked by mentor and family in digital betrayal. Comments poured in. People were horrified. Especially younger women in tech and design. They saw themselves in me, working twice as hard, trusted too little, expected to share too much. One comment stuck with me. If she'd built a business selling makeup or leggings, they'd have left her alone. But she was building space, real space, and they couldn't stand that it was hers. That one made me cry. Just once. Late at night. With Sasha asleep beside me. The next morning, Candace called. We got a court date, she said. They're going to try to drag it out, but we're ready. I stared at my reflection in the window. I wasn't scared. I was ready too. The courtroom wasn't glamorous. Just beige walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, and that weird old linen smell that clings to file folders and forgotten air vents. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Candace, watching Paul Kingsley, my former mentor, my thief, adjust his tie like this was some award ceremony he was being reluctantly dragged into. Aaron sat a row behind him, pale and quiet. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Greg was there too. My mother wasn't. I wasn't sure if that was mercy or strategy. Candace had warned me, they'll paint you as unstable. Emotional. Overly reactive. We'll kill that fast. She wasn't wrong. Paul's attorney opened with the usual condescension wrapped in legalese. Miss Rowe was understandably upset. Her decision to hoard funds in private accounts while working under the guidance of Mr. Kingsley reflects a breakdown in communication, not criminal intent. I almost laughed out loud. Hoard? It was my money. Then they tried character dissection. Exhibit A, emails where Paul had given me encouragement to pursue more ambitious goals. Exhibit B, my original retreat fund spreadsheet, marked shared planning in a folder Paul had touched once in 2018. They said I was confused about mentorship boundaries. Candace smiled when they finished. She stood slowly, adjusted her jacket, and turned to the judge. Your Honor, let's be clear. This case is not about hurt feelings. It's about digital surveillance, unauthorized fund access, and intentional redirection of personal savings into a false enterprise without consent. Then she laid it all out. The spyware, installed during the so-called firm-wide optimization. The IP logs tracing the access back to Paul's work laptop. The fund transfers, matching withdrawal timestamps with remote login records. The business registration for Row Strategic Innovations, opened under Aaron's name and mine. My name. Used without permission. When it came time for testimony, I took the stand. The judge, a woman in her late 50s, watched me closely. I wasn't polished. I didn't have a lawyer's rhythm. I just told the truth. How I'd spent 10 years saving. How I'd tracked every dime. How I'd trusted Paul with a shared structure he claimed would maximize firm synergy. How I found the spyware. How my own cousin had registered a company using my name to make it sound legitimate. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I wasn't asking for help, I said at the end. I just wanted space. That's all I ever wanted. To build something that was mine. Then it was Aaron's turn. He hesitated. Sweating in his stiff shirt, tapping his foot against the chair leg. Paul didn't look at him. Maybe he already knew. Aaron cleared his throat. Paul said it was already agreed upon, that Elena wouldn't mind. He told me the funds came from a joint innovation pool. I didn't know the whole story until later. And when you learned the truth? Candace asked. He looked at me. I tried to return what I could. And did Mr. Kingsley offer you anything to stay quiet? Silence. Then. He offered me $40,000. Called it a hush grant. Said it was standard for private incubators. That turned heads. Even the judge's eyebrows lifted. By the time the trial wrapped, the narrative was clear. Paul wasn't a mentor. He was a predator with a keyboard. He'd exploited my trust, my plans, and my silence, all under the guise of guidance. The verdict came 3 days later. Paul was ordered to repay the $36,000 siphoned from the retreat fund, plus $75,000 in punitive damages for digital misconduct and breach of fiduciary responsibility. The judge also referred the case to federal authorities under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Candace leaned over and whispered, "We just made precedent." Paul didn't look at me as he left the courtroom. Greg did, once. A flash of something, guilt, maybe. Or recognition. Like he finally saw me not as a kid with graph paper but as the architect of his consequences. Aaron paused near the door. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded once. "I know. But sorry didn't rebuild the fund. That would be my job, again. Only this time, no one was watching over my shoulder. The foundation was mine now. And no one would touch it again." We found the new property 6 weeks after the trial ended. It wasn't as big as the first one, just over half an acre, tucked deeper into the Cascades, farther off the main road. No power lines nearby, no cell service unless you stood on a specific boulder at the back edge of the lot. I loved it instantly. Sasha stood next to me in her hiking boots, her camera dangling forgotten around her neck. "This is the one," she said. It was rougher than the first sight, less polished, less convenient, but that felt right. Like starting from scarred earth instead of perfect soil. We paid cash. No loans. No middlemen. No mentors. We spent the next 8 months building it ourselves. Foundation, framing, panels, plumbing. Sasha documented everything with photos: sunrise over the skeletal frame, rain bouncing off the metal roof mid-construction, my boots coated in sawdust and clay. The house wasn't big, but it was strong. Self-powered. Fully off-grid. Passive heat. Rain catchment. A small garden carved into the edge of the clearing. It wasn't a retreat anymore. It was a sanctuary. I called it Boundary House. The name started as a joke, but stuck. The architecture reflected it: split-level lines, open airflow, reinforced walls, and intentional separations between zones. Every room had purpose and space. Privacy by design. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 10 years building a future to get away. But now, I wanted people to come. Not everyone. Just the ones who needed it. So I started a workshop. We hosted our first boundary retreat 9 months after move-in. 8 attendees, mostly women in creative fields, some burned out, some just tired of being told to smile more. We spent the weekend talking about sustainable design, sure, but also about personal design, how to build a life where your time, your space, and your boundaries are protected like any other structure. I stood in the main room that first night, looking at the faces lit by solar lanterns and firelight, and said, "Protection is the foundation of every sanctuary. Especially from the people who claim to love you most." No one flinched. They just nodded. Sasha started running a photo series called Autonomous Spaces, portraits of women in the homes or workspaces they built alone. It went viral in the eco-design world. People started reaching out, asking questions, telling their stories. And me? I started working with a group of cybersecurity advocates. The kind Candace knew: whistleblowers, white hat hackers, survivors of digital abuse. We launched a public tool called Glassline, an open-source app that detects personal spyware on laptops and alerts users if remote activity is detected. It's not perfect, but it's growing. And it's free. Paul never apologized. Of course not. Greg sent one email. 4 sentences. No subject line. We didn't handle things right. I hope you find peace in what you're building. You were always sharper than we knew. I didn't reply. Aaron reached out once more. A voice memo, actually. He sounded tired. Said he was rebuilding, without shortcuts this time. Said he kept the photo I took of him at 13, sitting on the garage floor, holding his first soldering project, smiling like he'd built a rocket. I don't know if he meant it. But I listened to the whole thing. That felt like enough. My mother sent a brittle apology via card. Handwritten. Formal. Too little, too late. She signed it "Love, Mom," like nothing had changed. But everything had. We held our 3rd retreat in the fall. Full house. Leaves gold and red outside the window, the air clean and quiet. Someone asked me, during a Q&A, if I regretted trusting the wrong people. I thought about it. Then I said, not really. I just regret not trusting myself sooner. The group fell quiet for a second. Then someone whispered, same. Later that night, Sasha and I sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, mugs of tea warming our hands. The stars were so clear it felt like we could see into the past. She leaned against me. You ever think about what would have happened if you'd built on that first property? I shook my head. It would have been beautiful. But it wouldn't have been this. Because this house, this community, this quiet clarity, was built not in spite of the betrayal, but because of it. And I'd do it all again. Every blueprint. Every wall. Every line. Because now I knew what it meant to draw the boundary, and build the house that keeps it standing.